Folks, I am here with four eminent names from the tech industry who is working into the developer relations and helping you techies stay updated and relevant in the tech market. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to have KK Ghan, who is the lead evangelist, APAC Twilio, Raymond Camden, senior developer evangelist, Adobe, Daniel Myers, developer relations, Snowflake, and Raguraman Barathalwar, VP of Network and Edge Group, Intel. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. And before we kickstart and before we go on to our questions and insights that you're here to discuss, please tell me how excited you are to be a part of the Gladiators 2022 Grand Finale. So, Daniel, we'll begin with you.
Yeah, really excited to be here, and thank you for inviting me, Al. It's always great to see the great things that developers create, and it's going to be exciting to see that.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Let's go to KK.
Hi everyone, this is KK. I'm so excited to be here today. Together with other panelists here, I'm very excited and can't wait to have the discussion and share and also learn from others as well.
Thank you, KK. Raghu.
Hey, hi again. Thank you for the opportunity, and it's very exciting, to be, back along with the developers community to share and learn from them. So, and thank you for other panelists also joining, and we'll have an exciting conversation I'm looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Raghu. Raymond.
Thank you so much for having me here. As a developer, anything that makes my life easier makes me happy. So if I can make other people happy, I think that's great.
Lovely. That's exactly what we're here for. That's exactly why we're having this conversation in an event like this. So let's get started. I cannot actually wait for each one of you to share your experiences and your learnings and how that can be a very, very important aspect for our developer community also to learn from each one of you. So let's begin. Okay, so, to start with, let's talk about the basics. What is the developer-first approach? And how do you think the developer-first companies ensure to have consistent engagements with the developer community? And what are the elements that you look at while you're trying to strategize this entire developer relationship that you built with? So, Raymond, let's begin with you.
Yeah, so I think it's really obvious when I am looking for a solution. I know there'll be 5 to 10 solutions for everything I want to do. That's just the way the internet is now. But it's really obvious and really quickly obvious the companies that give a darn about the developer experience. I know I can solve any problem at all. There's a library, there's a service, there's a framework out there. But some things will be very painful to use. Some things I will hate to use. I'll hate my job. I'll hate everything about it. And some things I will just love to use. And that is always the company or organization, whatever, that actually cares about how easy it is for me to use the product. And that comes across in everything from just even how you sign up for it, to documentation, to getting that first win. When a company cares about that, a developer notices immediately, and they will care a lot about it, to the point where comparing a free solution to one that may cost a bit more money, if the one that costs a bit more money is actually easier to use, I will spend that money.
Thank you so much, Raymond, for that. Raghu, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I think Raymond covered pretty good with respect to the experience, right? The user experience and the developer experience. So I want to add on top of it, right? What Raymond talked about. I think for me, as a developer and now as a technical lead here in Intel, the API first approach is the primitive of the developer. That means your product should be speaking with an exposure of interface. Your users are your API, how you can easily use it. So I see around 3 primitives around that, right? How you can design your API. Your API is the first user interface for your product or your application. So design for that. Once your primitives are set properly, then your implementation follows the APIs, not the reverse of it. So I think that should be the design principle around it. And then on top of it, what Raymond said, it should be self-descriptive. And then the documentation and how to use that API with the flow should be so simple enough. so that the scalability of adoption of your API, and how they can make use of that API for their own innovation, the developer community, you keep it open for the innovation to the open world. I think the adding on top of it is API first approach is the key primitive for it. Yeah.
Thanks, Raghu. KK.
Yeah, thanks both Raymond and Nagu for sharing, the view on both, the developer first approach and API centric. The way I look at it, for me to answer the questions, what is developer first approach? I think we will need to try to understand why developer first. So if you look at it, we are living in the era where software technology touch our life constantly. From the moment we woke up and we go to work, we hit the hay, right? And because of this, business also relies a lot on the software technology to provide better services and keep in touch with the customers. So this really rely a lot on developers, because developers are the group of people who actually help the company to build solution where it helps the company, the businesses to stay competitive, to win in the marketplace. So then, because of this, we start to look at how we lead to the questions such as how productive or effective or innovative our developer teams are, right? Are they stay productive? So by looking from that angle, we start to to realize, based on my recent webinar with TechGig, I actually shared like developer actually spend about 70% of their time doing things that are not related to coding, more like scalability, looking at the infrastructure, deployment, scalable deployment, and so on. So the remaining 30%, maybe 5% out of the 30%, only they spend on the coding. So the question is, why developer first approach? Because developers are the key asset to the company, where it helps us to keep us motivated, competitive, stay competitive and win in the marketplace, right? And we need to really address and look at what kind of challenge and how to help the developer team to stay focused on coding, then thinking or spend time on things that is not relevant. And by looking at the ecosystem today, help the developer not to reinvent the wheel. By looking at the software development, we look at a lot of time, are we working on something that is productive or something that is not relevant? So that is why I think why developer first approach is important. And what is the developer first approach? Basically, to summarize, I think to help developers stay focused on coding, and so that they do not reinvent the wheel. Yeah.
So can you help me understand, how do you look at the consistent engagement when it comes to these solutions? You particularly mentioned about the approach, but how do you look at consistently engaging with the developer community?
Yeah, so I think from what we are doing here in Twilio, we have a special team of so-called task force who is working closely with the developers communities. So the activities that we do today, we look at it like we host developer community events, we support by sponsor, or we support by spending our time with the developers community to share some of the knowledge or technologies that we know and we learn about. Yeah, and then of course to also participate in some of the developers, I mean, as many as possible, the developers related activities. So these activities that I am doing today, like for example, user group or meetup group, right? And then it's so-called like webinars or seminars, any opportunity for us to be with the developer, to listen to the developers on what they're doing, what kind of challenges they have, and also looking for opportunity like how to work closely with developers. So that is the strategy we have in Twilio actually. Yeah.
Thanks, KK, for that. Daniel, I'll move to you. Help me understand about, of course, the approach, the developer-first approach that we're talking about, and being one of the evangelists, of course, you can help us also understand about the strategies. So please go ahead.
Absolutely. So definitely, agree with what Raymond, Raghu, KK said. And just to add on that, I think, when you look at a developer-first mentality through the lens of adoption, right, of your product, really, in my opinion, what that means is, you are prioritizing and thinking about the success of the adoption of your product depends on developers. Right. And so when you think of it that way, it's very similar to, customer focused mentality of a business. Right. But in this case, the primary customer that you're targeting and the primary user of your product is the developer. Right. And so everything that goes around that is what you look at when developing your product. Right. The ease of use for developers to extend your product through APIs that you're building. Right. What hooks are you providing developers? What sample code are you providing your developers? What everything that goes around enabling the success of the developer on your product is what goes with the developer first mentality. And it's really a conscious business decision to be developer first. And it really, through the lens of adoption, is one of the ways that you make that decision.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that. I think that really sums up for us that what the entire approach is and how you people, being the experts here, strategize this entire thing for our developer community or in developer community that you're working with. Daniel, to continue with this, tell us about the entire API first design methodology. How is it so powerful, and how it is, sort of a weapon that you are out with looking for what you want, and how you're looking at the kind of innovation from the developer community.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like how Raghu, said it's a primitive of a developer first mentality. I think that's a great way to frame it. And some of the benefits of a API first, and the importance of API is that the API is the literal contract between what you're building and other teams within your organization or company. It's also the literal contract between you and your developers that are building on your product. And so when you have a tangible programmable contract like a REST API that you can define and share with others, you can start to build on top of that and really instill some kind of core metrics around that contract, right? So you can really get granular on, hey, here's the SLA for service level agreement for how fast it should respond, or how much uptime we should have on this specific API endpoint. It also, being an API first, or one of the elements that you develop against is it helps to, from a architectural standpoint within your application, to kind of define different segments of your application that can scale independently, right? And so you can get better metrics on your product on, hey, here's the important pieces of my product that external developers are using a lot, and can help steer the roadmap of your product later. And it's also a good way to point to your users, in many cases, in our cases, the developers using these APIs, of saying, hey, for this API, is the return object that you're getting, basically for product feedback. It's a good way to have a well-structured, defined product feedback in certain areas of your product. So I think that the key takeaway here is definitely it's a primitive. I love the way that Raghu framed that. That's great, of a developer first mentality, and it's something that really helps the success and growth of a developer first product.
Thank you, Daniel. I think the entire frame that you've put up for us is really important, and it is something that we as community also look up to. Our kind of product engagement that you bring in, and how interesting or how innovative it is, right? So thank you so much for that. I will now move to KK. KK, how do you think the API first approach has grown in the software industry? Because there was this time nobody was even talking about developers relationship altogether, and this has really come up. I think in the past 5 years, this has really come up as a topic that people have at least started having conversations around. And maybe this might be happening, overseas, but especially in India, when I say this is hardly being talked about right now as well. So how do you
Yeah,
think this has evolved altogether, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like this is instead of saying this is a trend out there, you said there is really a need where for most of the businesses to look into API first, and reason being, if you look at how technology evolved today, uh, we we s- we pretty much need to call external API most of the time for any application we develop. For instance, we call weather. We try to get a weather data by calling weather API. We try to get a list of cities by calling cities in a country by calling the city this API, for example. Or if you need something like to find out the exchange rate, for instance, you call the exchange rate API. No one is looking at creating everything or maintaining everything by themselves. It's going to be very costly to do that, and in fact, it's not ideal to do that. And this, I would say, is thanks to the maturity of the microservices technology today, right? We talk about cloud native microservices, and it has come to a level of maturity where it is so ready that even many of the companies out there, they are focused to just build API to support other business solutions instead of to provide entire solution. They provide something, the element or key component that is needed by every single software solutions. So one example I can share, for instance, for any solutions that we try to build, for sure we will need identity management. For sure we will need authentications, authorizations. So is anyone day to day try to build that themselves? No, we just call the API, available solution, microservices that is so focused and provide such a good and complete set of functionality surrounding the identity management, right? If you look at okay, maybe ask the questions such as, for every solution application we build, for sure we will need to send email notification, for instance. So are we, because of the need to send email, and with the need to maintain the SMTP servers ourselves? Might not be, right? No one do that, and we just call the email API. For any application we build, there is a need for us to provide a better engagement with our customer, a bridge to bring together the users and the systems. So that is what we are expert in Twilio, customer engagement. So don't tell me that in order to send SMS, you will need to set up your own SMS gateway with the telco, right? You don't do that. You just seek for what are the API that supports this type of functions. So that really help us by reducing the cost, the effort, and keep us focused on addressing the business solution rather than reinventing the wheel to do all the things that other people have been doing good. So to answer the question why API first approach has grown so much in the software industry is because I would say the majority of the microservices today is really helps a push and a motivation to go API first. And of course, it's also like what I shared earlier, because there's really a need for us to do that. I still remember one of my recent webinar that I shared at Philippines FEU student chapter. I talk about all about API. So there is one interesting data. I think it's by slash data to look at how many developers out there are using API. So the data shows that about 90% of developers are using API in all their coding. But to me, the way I look at it, it should be higher actually. You can think of any solution or application you develop, chances are you need to call the API unless you are looking at things like maybe a simple console application where you provide a simple function. If you are talking about web application itself, a web application itself for the users to visit a website is already an API, right? So the statistic result shows that out of the 90% of the API that we use, right, 70% are actually consuming or calling the API of third party, what we call the third party API. And the remaining 20% of the API related works are internally built or built in-house kind of API. So by looking at this statistic data, right, the survey itself, we can tell the API approach is so important, and that is why it has grown so much in the software industry, because of the need that each of us, when we do coding, we need the API, right? So API is not just about exchanging data, but you need to look at even in-house applications. For instance, you develop, chances are other applications will need to call your API, which it provides certain function to simplify or to reduce the effort that other people might need if they have to create from scratch. So that, I hope will help to better understand why the API first approach has grown so much in the software industry. So that is from my side.
Absolutely, KK, and I'm sure you've given us a handful of stats to basically understand the entire usage of API and how developers are actually looking at it. So thank you so much for that. Raghu, I'm going to move to you. Tell me, you are one of the techies here, and you look at things differently from when it comes to developing the relationship with the developers here. You tell me, how can developers stay relevant in the software industry at this point in time? Because here we are talking about the products that you're looking at being used by the developers. So let's talk about a little skilling and what's in demand, what the industry is looking at altogether. Please help us understand.
Excellent question. Actually, I think we see a paradigm shift for last, I would say, maybe 2 decades, or even now this decade is changing very dramatically, right? Previously our developer community is more traditional. When I say traditional, is more tied end to end, a monolithic block, right? End to end, the complete functionality is written by a company or maybe a couple of companies working together to realize the solutions. And so the traditional development and traditional monolithic single or maybe couple of multi-system solutions, bringing the solutions, and then more towards fixed function, right? Fixed function and rule-based, those are all the traditional, I call, still some industries still works on that, but the most of the community moving away from this traditional approach, more towards very high degree of abstraction. Okay, abstracting the whole complexity of your hardware or an operating system or a language, moving towards more modern software paradigms, which we talked about, right? The microservices, containers, and thinking about deployment. I think KK said very well actually, which is the developers previously we worried about more about 70% of coding, and then 30, maybe 10, 20% more towards how my deployment is going to look like. But we see a paradigm shift, like more like, hey, how I am exposing my product as a service, and how this service can be consumed by many. And that comes with a deployment model, right? The scaling model comes, first before coding, right? And then obviously moving away from this, I've written the code more for a fixed versus it can evolve. And this is where we see the trend of, adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning approaches, where the model behaviors, right? The data-based model behaviors are getting more and more opening up the coding, the way we approach the solution, and then the way that we end up doing the code. So in a nutshell, I think, we are breaking this, and that is an excellent, I would say a world is getting created for the developer community coming together and helping each other to produce their vision of a solution or a product in a faster fashion, right? So that's the trend I see coming, and that's how the developers are more and more catching up, or actually they are evolving the trend, by the way, right? So and with that, and I think there are I would say maybe I've seen in addition to what I mentioned about, it's about key things is it's a customer outcome driven development. Previously we have seen more, our roadmaps are more feature developed. Okay, have I developed a feature? Rather today the approach is more towards is this a feature that I will expose my customer value? It's more about outcome driven development, okay, which is, we see that trend more coming. That means small blocks, but it gives you the customer value. I talked about the modern programming languages, right? How do we abstract it? And then more bulky code versus a monolith, simple blocks of code which can be maintained simply, and then abstract this whole things. And then the paradigms, I talked about the containers and services and deployment. The most and also the acceptance of AI ML in your development cycle, okay, is for your triaging, or your test case, smart testing. So adopting the AML techniques in your development, not only for customer usages, and faster release cycle. When during the days of the developer back a decade back, we always talk about code check-in done, right? Now this is more about it is more about continuous integration, continuous deployment and delivery, right? So it's the complete life cycle is looked into it as one cycle. The developer is looped into the whole cycle, and it doesn't end with the design and the coding, right? And that is also how fast this release cycle can be made. I think those are all the trends, and I think the developer community more, they are aware of this changes and contributing to these changes and innovating these changes. I think the innovation is going to be more faster for the consumers.
Yeah,
Thank you
Raghu,
so
I
much,
think
Raymond.
thanks for sharing that. I think one of the points I would like to add on that you shared about, today, the way the developer works compared to in the past is really a big change itself. Looking at the monolithic kind of application development, developer tend, in the past, like work on their own and to solve a problem. But because of the change of the cloud native or microservices, you're no longer working by yourself. You need to be, to be aware of what is available out there in order to, make sure you spend the time where it's worth that you spend. And I mean to be more, stay relevant in the software industry for developers. I think that is why I think many companies start to realize, and many developers start to realize, not just working on your own, just go out and be in the developer community to learn what other people have been doing, and and also to share and to learn. I think that really helps the developer to stay relevant. Yeah.
Thank you, Raghu, and thanks, KK, for adding on to those little bit of insights that you think is more relevant. Thank you, and I will now move to Raymond. Raymond, you being the senior developer evangelist here, help me understand how can organizations embrace API first approach to empower developers. So far, we've been speaking about the whole method and how we do it. Any tips, tricks that you think can be implemented? Because as I was speaking to KK, that we're still having these conversations. We just started having these conversations, and we are not yet there to start the implementation of these things, how it's done, how it's even talked about, I should say. So help us understand how actually organizations can look at this.
Absolutely, and I want to touch on something KK mentioned, the survey where it said 90% of developers are using APIs. I would bet of that 10%, there's a sizable portion of that are using APIs and may not realize, things may be so normal now that they may not even realize when they're making use of an API. In terms of, how an organization can have an API first mentality, think about the API as your product. So, somebody mentioned a weather API. The weather information, the forecast is data. That's whatever. The developer is going to be using your API. You can absolutely begin your planning, begin your development at that API level, and not even worry about the data. Worry about that later. During your testing, you can have people try to use the API, return fake static information, but just look at what they have to do to make use of your API. Are you asking them to go through a bunch of hard steps just to get that final result, or are, as you see people use it, are there things that you see that you could simplify to make that experience easier? What I touched on earlier, like if I'm looking for weather, I know there's going to be 100 solutions out there. I'm going to gravitate to the one that's easiest to use. You're all given the exact same forecast, hopefully, for my particular city. What is going to be different is how I actually use the product. So again, like if I was building that service, I would absolutely begin planning that particular API and not even worry about the data until you know that it's going to be something that will be easy to use.
Thank you so much, Raymond. And I never thought that I'll have this conversation, which will bring in so many elements for all of us to actually discuss and call out and actually highlight. So thank you so much. I mean, Raymond, KK, Daniel, Raghu, I had a wonderful time actually discussing the basics elements, because it's very important to address the basics before we actually advance onto any levels and start the execution even. So in terms of the strategies that we are talking about, in terms of the whole understanding that we need to have, I think we're still not there and we've just started. And we, TechGig, as a developer community, we every year, this is an annual event for us, called Gladiators. Next year, we will have our 10th edition, the decadal edition next year that we'll be hosting, and it's going to be much, much more bigger than what it is this year. But we've always looked upon innovation, and we've helped organizations and the developer community to come together, work upon it, and bring out the better in what we are doing. And of course, technology is advancing every day. Every day we come to hear new about AI, ML, data analysis, big data, you name it, cloud. I have something or the other that has come up in the market. So it's an evolving process that all of us are part of. And you as experts here, I'm sure, you guys are also working constantly upon the engagement and how you can actually drive the right innovation and the usage altogether. So once again, thank you so much. I'm grateful for this entire conversation that I had with you. Before we sign off, before we wrap up this entire conversation, please give me the closing remarks, and please ensure that you wish our finalists all the best, because we are about to declare the results of our finale tonight. So just go ahead. Let's begin. Let's begin with you, KK.
Oh yeah, sorry, I was on. Yeah, well, I mean, it was a great sessions. Having a discussion around developer first, API first, and it's really great to to learn from everyone here in the room.
Thank you, KK. Raghu.
Hey, thank you, the panelists and Sukriti. A wonderful session, and all the best for the finalists, and good luck, and all the participants. You are winners. You are the gladiators. Taking the first step in participation. So winning comes, as part of it. So, and special congratulations for the finalists and the winners for it, and thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Raghu. Daniel.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to have this conversation with everybody here. Thank you for the invite. Good luck to all of the participants and the finalists. I mean, it's going to be awesome, and looking forward to seeing it.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Raymond.
Thank you again for inviting me. This was a really great conversation, and good luck to all of y'all.
Thank you so much, Raymond, once again. I'm sure our audience is going to take home so many highlights and so many important things that we've talked about today. So thank you so much once again. Before we wrap up and move to our live event and see what's happening there, let's give a thumbs up to our audience, wishing them good luck. Let's do this for them, and we'll have our wishes sent to the finalists. So thank you so much once again. This calls for a wrap. Let's go and check out what's going on in the live event there and what's coming next. Thank you so much once again, gentlemen.